Y'all, we are so back for season 3 of the Emmy award-winning Traitors, and judging by this cast so far, I think we are going to be in for one hell of a crazy season. As per usual, we have a mix of hardcore competitors from shows like Big Brother, Survivor, and The Challenge, but there's also a mix of randos plucked from various sections of reality TV. Honestly, this cast, and in particular these Traitors, seem to be some of the least put together out of all the seasons we have so far, which I'm sure is going to be a lot of fun for us, the audience. But before we get into all that, please make sure you hit that subscribe button below if you have not already. Here on my channel, I do recaps and deep dives about a bunch of reality TV shows, so if that's something you're into, then maybe this is the channel for you. Now, let's get started. So I'm not necessarily going to talk about every individual in the cast, but I do want to talk about some of the pre-existing relationships that have already started to cause some drama right here on day one. First, we have the beef between the Tom Sandoval guy and Chrishell, which I'm not a big Bravo girly. I'm not too into that world, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But I do know about the whole cheating scandal thing that happened with Tom. And I also know that y'all have been shading this man relentlessly online, both for being very bad at this game and being very, very sweaty. Now, I'm not going to sit here and speculate on this man's life too much, but from the way I see it so far, I don't think he's going to be too long for this game. Now, I do know a little bit more between the beef between Danielle and Britney from Big Brother. It's really nothing too complicated. Basically, Britney pretty much got Danielle eliminated on this Big Brother Christmas spin-off special thing that they did last year, and apparently the beef is still up from that. So they're already foreshadowing some potential beef and drama happening between these two ladies later on down the line. Maybe that'll happen when Britney starts to get a little bit suspicious of her buddy Danielle, but we're just going to have to see how that all shakes out. As everyone gathers together, Alan then introduces the group to the very first twist of the season. It basically gives the players a chance to right then and there on the spot quickly and easily eliminate any person of their choosing. But of course, there's a string attached. In order to eliminate someone, that is going to force Boston Rob to come and join them in the game. And at that point, all the temptation for me would be dead, okay? All shade included, I would never want to play any game with Boston Rob, okay? Totally fine watching him do his thing, manipulate the people on all these other shows, but not me, not happening. So I'm totally not surprised that nobody took this deal. And given what we see happen towards the end of this episode, I'm sure the producers weren't surprised that this wasn't going to happen either. And I'm sure this part was probably written into the show, if you know what I mean. So now that the cast is officially acquainted, it is now time for Alan to choose his traitors. And to pretty much nobody's surprise, all of the really big gamers in there really want to be traitors. Like, they're practically begging for it. And honestly, I don't blame them for this at all, because even though it's probably more difficult to lie and play as a traitor, it's also the power position in the game. The faithfuls are pretty much animals being led to the slaughter. And even though it's messed up, I would personally rather be the shepherd than the sheep. So of course, when Queen Danielle Reyes is first chosen to be a traitor, she is overjoyed, and so am I. She is an OG Big Brother strategist legend, and this is the role she was born to play. But the thing is, she's already widely known for being a gamer, so she's gonna have to downplay all of that and really turn the stealth on. But as we grow to see throughout the next couple episodes, I wouldn't necessarily describe her as the word stealthy, and I don't know if that's gonna be a big problem for her later on down the line. We're gonna have to see. The next person that Alan selects is Carolyn from Survivor, which is definitely more of a chaotic pick, but a fun one at that. If you don't know Carolyn, she's definitely unique and one of a kind, and you'll find that out in good time. But at the same time, to me, she is surprisingly stealthy. And I know a lot of people clowned her for her performance on Survivor, but honestly, I was legitimately impressed with her performance, like seriously. Like, my expectations of her were admittedly low going in just because she was a little bit wacky and she seemed like maybe she wouldn't get along socially, but by the end of the season, I have no problem saying that she by far exceeded my expectations, so hey, maybe she'll do the same here on the Traitors. We'll have to see. And our final traitor is none other than Bob the drag queen. Now, I haven't seen every season of Drag Race, but I have seen Bob's season, and oh my god, what a star. Bob is insanely talented and such an incredible entertainer, but my question is, how is he going to do on here? Because this is a much different type of competition show than Drag Race. Even if Bob isn't the savviest traitor out there, he's definitely going to be the funnest / funniest, so that I'm excited to see. So far we have 3 very hardcore competition players as our traitors, but I think the fun part about this whole thing is they are all so completely different, and that part I love. During the very first mission of the game, the players learn very quickly that hella people are going to have to sacrifice their chance at safety in order to make money for the group. Now, there are risks involved with both sacrificing and saving your game here. If you choose to sacrifice, you could look sus because why do you feel so safe? Stuff like that could easily make you look like a traitor, which unfortunately some of those housewives figured out just a little bit too late.
The faithfuls! Oh wait, now they'll think we're traitors because we didn't care about giving it up. Now we're targets.
No, because they can.
We're targets.
In the end, only 8 people ended up volunteering to sacrifice themselves for the money, most of them women, which I was definitely side-eyeing at first. It was just weird and kind of annoying to see how the women were just kind of expected to easily sacrifice themselves and put their own games on the back burner in order to help others, but hey, that is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. Now, Danielle and Bob both ended up volunteering to sit out here, which again, could end up biting them in the butt in the future because stuff like that just makes you look sus, makes you look comfortable, which makes you look like a traitor. But for now, they're just doing all this overacting, trying to make themselves look less suspicious, which we're just going to see how that ends up playing out at the end. It's probably not the best strategy to go about it that way, but as of now, it seems to be working okay because people are more suspicious of the housewives than any other group right now. Later on in the night, the traitors all group up for the very first time to discover who everyone is, and immediately there is some beef in the air because Caroline and Danielle are already bickering about what strategy to use and who to murder in the first place. As we see the next morning, the traitors end up setting their sights on housewife Dorinda against Carolyn's wishes. Dorinda had been a pretty big suspect for the faithfuls, and it sounded like Carolyn wanted her to stay in the game in order to kind of frame her and put the heat on her more, which honestly I totally understood. I actually think that Carolyn had the right idea here, she just wasn't able to articulate it well enough. Thus, she ends up losing out to Danielle and Bob. Speaking of Danielle and Bob, after Dorinda is murdered, they're doing all this fake crying stuff, and they're literally the only people doing it. Like, the other housewives aren't even doing that stuff, and they already knew her. So that right there is starting to make them look sus. And at this point, I'm actually starting to wonder, like, is Carolyn for real the best traitor out of everybody in this group? Like, seriously? So, with the first murder out of the way, it is now time for Alan to reveal the next twist in the game. Boston Rob is back, and he brought some friends with him, Wes from The Challenge and Derek from Big Brother. These 3 are all big heavy hitters from their respective shows, but honestly, I wasn't too excited to see any of them joining the cast again. And that's no shade to anybody in particular. I just feel like I've seen a lot of Wes and Boston Rob in particular recently, just from the other random shows that they've been on, so I didn't really need to see them again. Derek is a little different because he hasn't played these games in a while, so it's been a long time since anybody has really been able to see what he can do. He's definitely not the most interesting or charismatic character or anything like that, but he is a very, very good strategist. So if anybody's really going to be able to suss out the traitors and figure out who they really are, I think Derek is a really good pick for that. Despite them all coming in late, we see them all use their own strategies of using their shields in order to integrate themselves with the group and try to gain information from everybody. So I don't really have any negative notes so far, but I will say I did notice how Derek gave Dylan a shield in order to gain a little favor for him. I feel like if Derek is looking for his Cody, he may have found him in and Dylan. And as we'll see later, Dylan is actually pretty good at sussing people out. So I'm just curious to see what these two are going to do in the future. So now that we officially have our cast together, it is time for the first round table of the season. I just love these round table segments so much. It's always the messiest and most interesting part of every episode. Honestly, I wish the Survivor producers would sometimes take some notes from the Traitors, because the Survivor tribal councils have been pretty dull and a little bit formulaic for a while now, and I'm ready for that to change. Bob the drag queen is the first person to speak up and start naming names, which I thought was pretty odd for a traitor to do. You know, normally the traitors try to stay quiet and lay low during the beginning, you know, not draw too much attention to themselves, but nope, not Bob. Bob first calls out Wells, who then calls out someone else, and before you know it, we have this familiar notion of faithfuls just calling out the other faithfuls. The votes are spread out everywhere during this first round. Since nobody has anything really too solid to go on, I think like 7 or 8 people end up getting votes this first section. But in the end, Wells is the one who is ultimately voted out here. Bob's plans seem to work like a charm, but as we start to see soon, him being the loudest person in the room might not work out in his favor forever. During the very next murder ceremony, the traitors all gather together, where they discover that Boston Rob has indeed joined them as a traitor. 4 traitors in one season just sounds like a lot to me, but hey, whatever, not my show. For some reason, I just don't see all 4 of these people lasting past like episode 5 or so. So I'm just curious to see which one of these traitors is going to be the first one to leave. So the traitors' goal now just seems to be to create more confusion and chaos and drama within the group. There's a little bit of talk about getting people like Tom out in order to frame someone else, but they eventually decide to go for another housewife. They decide to murder Ayan here, and the reasoning was a little bit confusing to me, but hey, I guess that was their goal, so mission accomplished. The group's next mission ends up being that creepy funhouse challenge thing where they do an absolutely abysmal job. During this challenge, I was wondering why they didn't just call out the number of the door they were going into instead of describing the pattern of the door themselves, but I figure there must be some sort of rule in the rule book saying they couldn't use that strategy or something, because otherwise it made no sense to me. In the end, no one ends up winning any money or any safety, and now everyone is just walking back home pissed. Back at the mansion, the faithfuls are trying so hard to figure this thing out, but so far nobody is really catching on to anything solid except for one person, Dylan Efron. Now, I do want to give him a little shout out here because he's definitely an underdog coming in, since the only thing he's really famous for is being Zac Efron's little brother. But even though he's not a gamer per se, he's picked up on this strategy stuff pretty quickly, and he has a pretty decent read on who the traitors are. He's really suspicious of Bob, and honestly, his reads are pretty spot on so far. Survivor Jeremy is also on a roll because he's really suspicious of Danielle. But at the same time, he is not suspicious of Bob whatsoever, so that's also a point against him, sorry. Jeremy's also getting a little sloppy with it out there because he's revealing all this information to these big groups instead of smaller one-on-ones, and now people are starting to look his way, and it's just a whole big mess. Look, don't get me wrong, I love Jeremy down and everything, but I fear he may not be long for this game. The players then go on to the next round table, where we see that housewife Robyn is catching strays because she's a housewife, and Survivor Tony is catching strays because, well, he's Tony. With this Tony vote, I think a lot of this was really just his reputation preceding him out there. He is known for just being the sneakiest dude ever on Survivor, and so honestly, traitor or faithful, I don't blame anybody for wanting to get Tony out immediately as soon as they had the chance, okay? Tony was getting a lot of heat during this roundtable segment, and for a split second, I was kind kind of sort of starting to feel bad for him, but at the same time, he wasn't really doing the best job defending his game either. Boston Rob spoke out against Tony here too, which you could tell really hurt Tony's feelings and made him call Boston Rob a sellout. Of course, I think Rob was really doing this just to defend the other traitors, but you know, still very tough to watch. During the round table, there was also some big beef between Dylan and Bob the drag queen, where Dylan again correctly calls out Bob for being one of the traitors. And even though Dylan's assessment is spot on, again, Bob is a comedian and an entertainer, so he's able to immediately and pretty effectively, I think, clap back at all of Dylan's accusations.
Telling me because I would be good at it. That's just so now you're reading Alan's mind.
I'm saying that's exactly what she said about Tony.
I've been quiet for like 10 minutes now. And I don't even think you're a traitor, but you are misguided. That should be your drag name. Welcome to the stage, Misguided.
Episode 3 ends with this new twist in which the traitors are going to have to sneak around the mansion trying to group up and come up with a short list of 3 people to put up for murder. Now, we didn't get to see who all exactly is getting put on the hit list, but it did sound like at least Jeremy was going to be in a little bit of trouble heading into episode 4. So far with 3 episodes down, I'm going to go ahead and say that I actually think that Carolyn is doing the best out of all the traitors, which is wild. She just seems to be the quietest and the most sneaky by far, and I think her quirky personality is actually helping lower her threat level a lot. Out of the faithfuls, it looks like Dylan and Jeremy are doing pretty good so far, at least on the right track to figuring out who the traitors are. But again, I just don't know if they're going to be long for this game because of it, especially Jeremy. Of course, I want to know, what do you think of this season so far, and who is impressing you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know which one of these traitors do you think is going to be the first one to get found out, because I know they are not all going to last to the finale, okay? I don't know for sure, but if I had to make a blind guess, so far it's looking like Bob or Danielle are going down that path first, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. Of course, I'll be back here to recap the next episode with you all, but until then, peace.